The second jury note was equally important. Now, the jury doesn't have a trial transcript in the deliberation room, but it also doesn't have a copy of the jury instructions. I don't know why. We're going to find out more about that, too. And there are a lot of jury instructions, 55 pages worth. The jury's second note today was asking for those jury instructions to be repeated again. Court wrapped for the day today before we could learn whether the jury wants the whole 55 pages read back or just a section. But all 55 pages are pretty weedy, particularly the part that may ultimately matter the most, which is whether Donald Trump committed a felony. At the core of the 34 counts against Trump are 34 misdemeanor counts of altering business records. What makes those 34 misdemeanors become felonies is if they are committed in the service of breaking another law. And the prosecution says that other law that Donald Trump allegedly broke is New York election law, section 17152. Commit that to memory. Section 17152 of New York election law provides that any two or more persons who conspire to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means, and which conspiracy is acted upon by one or more of the parties thereto, shall be guilty of conspiracy to promote or prevent an election. The key phrase in there is unlawful means. That is the illegal way in which two or more people conspire to mess with an election. The jury instructions continue. Although you must conclude unanimously that the defendant, Donald Trump, conspired to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means, you need not be unanimous as to what those unlawful means were. In other words, the way this goes from a series of misdemeanors to a bunch of felonies is if those misdemeanors were made in order to break New York election law. And breaking that New York election law requires another unlawful act. But the jury doesn't have to agree on which act was unlawful. They just have to agree that it occurred. And on that front, the unlawful acts, they got options. In the jury's instructions, the jury's options for that secondary unlawful act are laid out for them as option 1, violations of the Federal Election Campaign Act. Option 2, falsification of other business records, not the 34 misdemeanors. Option 3, a violation of tax laws. Okay, I know. If your eyes are glazing over right now, I'm sorry. But imagine being a juror who has sat in that courtroom for more than 5 weeks now, who sat through 8 hours of closing arguments yesterday and had more than an hour of instructions read about aloud this morning, but was not actually given a copy of those instructions. Imagine sitting through all of that and then being asked to make sense of it all and decide the guilt or innocence of a former president of the United States. Joining me now to decipher all of this, our legal experts, Duncan Levin, former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, and MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Thank you both for sitting here so patiently as I read a very long script that probably went over everybody's head, including my own, other than yours. Lisa, is that sort of... I have really tried to get to the essence of, like, what the jury needs to focus on to get to the felony charges here. And first of all, am I right in focusing on this notion of the choose your own adventure of unlawful acts that they that they don't have to agree on, but they have to agree happened in some way?
Yes, and.
Okay.
Right? Because that is necessary but not sufficient. And before they get to the choose your own adventure part, there are some other things that they have to decide where they do have to be unanimous. And not just unanimous that it exists, but unanimous as to, like, the what and why of it. First, they have to find that Donald Trump caused business records to be falsified. Then they have to find, as you found or you already discussed, that when he did that, he had an intent to defraud that included an intent to commit or conceal another crime.
Yes.
The district attorney's office has identified only one crime that could be. That's New York election law 17152, which is a conspiracy to promote or prevent somebody's election through unlawful means. And that's where you get to the sort of choose your own adventure part. But I would say before you get to choose your own adventure, you got to go through a decision tree first.
Right.
And a decision tree that necessitates some unanimity on facts and elements before you get to decide, hey, I think the unlawful means is tax law, and Duncan thinks it's AMI's contribution to Donald Trump's campaign.
The reason I focus on the choose your own adventure part, Duncan, is because the other ones seem like boxes that are either checked or unchecked, right? Like you all agree on this, then you get to go to step B. You all agree. And then it's the last part of it where there's sort of the garden of forking paths, 3 different things that they could sort of disagree on, but agree generally happened. I just wonder if is this a complicated case for a jury?
No, it's actually a very simple concept that I think a lot of people are confused about because it's not really different than a lot of other cases. You could imagine a murder case, for example, where there are certain elements that have to be met to convict a defendant of murder. But the jurors could differ at the end of the day. Was it a bat or a knife or a club? That is a difference between an element of the crime and the means of the crime. The elements have to be unanimous, and they have to be unanimous in this case, like every other case. And there really are just sort of 2 different parts of it. There's the part that Mr. Trump caused these false business records, and that they have to unanimously agree that it was meant to conceal the commission of this New York State election law statute. That's it. Whether it's the Stormy Daniels payment or the Karen McDougal payment or a tax crime or seriatim filing of false business records, the jurors could disagree about that, but that is not an element of the crime. And so it's actually a pretty simple legal concept that seems complicated because there's so many options. That is a gift to the prosecutors here.
Right.
It is a gift that they don't need to be unanimous on that, but it does make it a little bit more free-flowing for the jurors because they get to pick whatever they want.
Well, I do wonder whether will that create more debate in the deliberation room? Who can know? Ultimately, you guys are saying as long as they agree on the sort of big contours of the crime,
Well, I would say not necessarily, to answer your question. And the reason why is there's no special verdict form here. There's not going to be a verdict form, at least as I understand it, that asks you, Alex, and me, Lisa, and you, Duncan, to fill out what you think the unlawful means are.
Right.
As long as they all agree that there are unlawful means, nobody is going to poll them to ask which option they chose. They just have to agree that there was one and literally check the box as to whether they find him guilty or not guilty as to each of these 34 counts.
They are asking for another read through of the jury instructions, though, Duncan. Does that signal anything to you? And why don't they get a copy of the instruction? I mean, IKEA desks come with the instructions. Why not the jury instructions?
Because why should we make it easy? There's this notion under New York law that the jury instructions are not evidence. So the jurors only get evidence back there. There's really no reason for it. And maybe it's something that should be looked at by some legislative body at some point, but they don't get it back there. And I don't know that there's anything that can be really read into about that other than the fact that they were really hard to follow. It was a lot of pages of very dense material, probably read to them after they're exhausted, and they just wanted to have them read to them again to understand what they are.
I feel seen.
Yes.
Who doesn't want them read again?